I tried to do this yesterday, but the video was too long and it wouldn't post. I made this video a year and a half ago, which is called How Asperger Syndrome Affects My Life Now. I constantly want to delete this video because I don't identify as having Asperger Syndrome anymore. And the video also starts with me saying something like, well, I guess I'm very high functioning, so you probably shouldn't judge Asperger Syndrome from listening to me. And in retrospect, I think that's a ridiculous thing to say. But I mean, like everyone else, I like when people talk to me on the internet, and I get a lot of comments on that video, so I don't want to delete it. But I wanted to make a sequel. First of all, like the whole Asperger's thing, kind of a stupid word, not going to be in the DSM anymore because it's not a concept that makes sense. I mean, it's not the only ASD diagnosis that I ever got either. And I also, the thing is that the reason I used that word about myself was not ever because I wanted to. Like, I used to use the word autistic when I was much younger. But, from non-disabled people, I would face, criticism because I would be told that you shouldn't be using that word about yourself because you're not severely disabled enough or something like that. I don't really think that this is a way of talking that makes sense. I mean, there are lots of, pretty much every disability that I can think of. There are some people who are very severely affected and some people who are very mildly affected. I also don't think that people can just talk to me and decide that I'm mildly affected when they don't live my life. So I guess I'm no longer interested in feeling guilty about using the word autistic about myself. I mean, I consider myself part of autistic culture. I consider people with severe disabilities to be people who I feel as much loyalty to as I do to people who have a disability experience very much like my own. I don't, I've known a lot of people with severe autism, and it's more severe, but it's not something else, and that doesn't really make sense to say it is. To actually talk about myself, I feel like before I didn't know other people with autism, so I was very, my whole view of what stuff was very much based on, like, what I read in books by people who didn't have autism, so I feel like I was always trying to fit myself into that kind of category, and then when I didn't fit it, I would just say, oh, well, I must be so high functioning that's why I don't fit into that description. But, as I've gotten to meet other people with autism and other disabilities, I've realized that, I have stuff going on that's pretty classic sometimes, but it hasn't been written about as much, but it happens to most of the autistic people that I know. Okay. So, first of all, the whole social thing has been something that's really massively changed for me in the past year and a half since I made that video and since I became more involved in disability culture. I think the thing is that even though before I used to think of myself as being, like, better and, like, recovered and, like, not really autistic anymore, like, because I was always judging myself by the standard of whether I looked like a normal person, it was very hard for me to relate to people who didn't have disabilities because I always felt inferior to them. Like, I guess the way that I walk is kind of different from some people who don't have disabilities. So, especially with other women, when I was friends with other girls, if we were both walking down the street, I would become, like, so conscious of the way that I walked and the way that it wasn't like the way the other person was walking that I would get, like, pretty upset. And it really poisoned my relationships, especially with other girls, because I was always comparing myself to them and thinking how, like, I couldn't move like them and stuff like that, which is kind of stupid. Another thing is that I was really, really worried always that other people didn't really want to be around me and that I was just, like, attaching myself to them. So it meant that it was hard for me to reach out to people, and then when I did, I felt really, like, upset about it, and, like, they didn't really want me there. And I think this has been it was a really bad thing in a lot of my friendships because I would always resent people as if they'd actually done something to me, when in fact, like, the only thing that was going on was that I thought that I was inferior to them, so I just resented them. And I guess all I can say is that since I've become more conscious of identifying as disabled and less upset about being disabled, it's pretty, like, you know, if I'm walking along and I know that I'm walking differently from someone else, it's like, surprise, I guess I'm disabled, so I walk like I'm disabled. Shock, not really a big deal. I mean, I figure that other people probably want to be around me just as much as they want to be around anyone else, so I'm not afraid, I guess, of trying to reach out to people and talking to people. And it's funny because people, professionals, always talk about social skills, and they frame social skills as being able to look like you're normal. But I mean, what I would call my social skills have vastly improved now that I don't care about that anymore, because, you know, when you're not thinking about trying to make yourself look like you're normal, you really are much more interested in other people, and you have a lot more energy to spare on just caring about other people and listening to what they have to say. Other stuff, the brain stuff, which is actually, like, the real problem. I've been watching The Walking Dead recently, which is a TV show about zombies, and I figured out that I'm basically like a zombie. Like, for example, if a zombie was following a person that it wanted to eat, and the person leaves, the zombie will just keep going in the same direction. And that's pretty much what I'm like. It's hard for zombies to, like, make new decisions or figure things out. Like, they just see objects that they used to use when they were alive, and they just get triggered into using them the same way because they don't really, you know, get it. It's very hard for me to think about anything in a new way or to switch myself into any kind of new task, which can be a really huge problem. It's and I mean, there's also a lot of stuff which I guess is probably a bit like having dementia, which is just, you know, constantly forgetting what you're doing a lot. And I mean, I know all this stuff is the kind of stuff where people can be like, oh, that happens to everyone, which is totally true. But I mean, the way that it happens to me is very pervasive. It makes it hard to do things. I also have pretty severe anxiety problems, and a problem is that I get such severe anxiety about my cognitive problems, which I guess are what you would call poor central coherence and executive dysfunction and stuff like that, if you like big words. I get so upset about those things that I, like, will intentionally, like, block off, like, the part of my brain that tries to remember what I have to do, and will intentionally get myself stuck on, like, new ideas, or not new ideas. I will intentionally get myself stuck on old ideas so I can just kind of stim out on them and not have to do the actual work, which, I mean, it's very hard. The only way, I mean, the good way for things to happen is for someone else to just sit down with me and, like, calmly explain to me what I have to do and help me, like, stay, like, emotionally stable during that. But that doesn't always happen because I don't get disability services at school because I haven't been recently diagnosed enough, etc. And even if I was, people would probably be like, well, autism is just a social disability, so why do you think you need help with mental stuff? Yeah, not a lot of fun, that stuff. Something that's interesting, I don't know how many people that happens to, but when things are very bad for me, I have, like, dissociative and derealization symptoms, which are, it basically means that everything kind of looks and feels the same. So, like, talking to my mom and talking to my best friend and talking to a stranger all feel exactly the same. It's like, I mean, intellectually, I remember who people are, but it's kind of as if I had just, like, been fed the information and I didn't actually have, like, the lived experience of having them in my life. So it's just like when you're with people, you don't feel the same click of recognition when you're having that kind of episode. I guess you could call it an episode. And I don't know, it can be really scary, especially because you feel like you don't know them, so it's kind of like a sense of stage fright because, you know, it's as if you're performing, like, a relationship with someone that you don't really have in your life. So that can be really hard, and I think that's a lot of why I try to avoid all my cognitive stuff and, like, just, like, end up fucking myself over by trying to ignore, like, the brain stuff, just because when I look at things head on and get a lot of anxiety, the results can be so unpleasant that I feel like it's almost worse not to do it. Okay, I ran out of time. I hope this video is short enough that it'll actually post, but I just wanted to make this because the other video I don't like so much, and I really think this is better and more in line with what I actually think about and believe now. Okay.